Okay, so would you guys like to share your level 2 questions? I'll take about 3 of them.
I'll go second.
Melanie?
I guess. How do you think the audience felt during and after the speech? What do you think they were thinking?
Dang.
Okay.
Mine's just like that.
So I'll take that one.
I have one. Oh, well,
No, it's not. It's not like that.
wait. I have a question though.
Just a moment.
Oh, okay.
During and after the speech. Jalen.
I don't know if it might be kind of sound like hers. I said compare how the audience opinion of Douglas changed before and after the speech. That's kind of like hers.
No, I'd say that's a little different. Their opinion of him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you said what was the audience's opinion?
Yeah, compare how the audience opinion of Douglas changed before and after the speech.
Brian.
I wrote, would you say that Frederick Douglass set the foundation for Martin Luther King's success?
I don't think that's a level 2. I think that's more level 3.
Okay.
Sam?
Is level 2 is where you find in text?
You have to read between the lines or infer something from the text.
Okay. I don't know if this is correct, but I said, how does Frederick Douglass feel about the American country? Like, how does he feel towards it?
Okay. That's not a level 3.
That's
I was
not.
wondering if it was more level 2 or 1. But, I mean, we'll go with level 2. How does Douglas
Feel about the American country?
feel about America? Okay, I'll take one more level 2 just because these are...
No, I have a level 3.
Any other level 2s? I'll take your level 3.
Okay.
Marcus.
Okay. I have one of them. Mine says, does Frederick Douglass apply negative effects towards the audience whenever he applies exclamation points, meaning as in like whenever he's yelling towards the audience?
So are you asking about his tone or?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so can you try rephrasing that for me?
Wait, you said rewrite it?
Rephrasing it?
Is it okay if you come back to me while I rephrase it real quick?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so anybody want to share their level 3? I'll just write those down in the meantime. Tyjon.
I have one. It says, imagine you were and how would you feel while he was giving your speech, and how would your views have changed after the speech?
Okay, that is more like the level 1 that we had. How do you think the audience felt during and after the speech? You know they were predominantly white, so it's going to essentially lead the same discussion. Matt?
How does Douglas's ideals correlate with the ideals of those who founded the country?
Okay. Any other level 3s?
So,
Hold on a second, Melanie. You already gave a level 2, right?
Can I get my level 3 again?
Brian, let's see.
Would you say that Frederick Douglass set the foundation for Martin Luther King's success?
Okay. Anyone else?
But, did you still want me to kind of rephrase the level two, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, to rephrase it, I said, does Douglas apply a negative or positive connotation, or, oh wait, no, I was reading the same question. Does Douglas apply a negative or positive tone when using exclamation points throughout his speech? And I actually have a question about whenever we do ask our own questions, does the person that asked the question go first, or does anybody else go first?
Just anyone.
Okay.
Okay, so anybody else have a level 3 they'd like to share? Okay, so have you guys been looking very much at the news about the Mike Brown and Eric Garner and so on? Is there anyone that could probably formulate a level 3 question where they're correlating what Douglas was talking about with anything that's going on currently? Anyone? Besides Matt?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just Matt.
Okay, Matt, go for it.
Yes, okay, how does the actions taken in support of their ideals differ from the actions taken by Frederick Douglass?
Of whose ideals?
Of the black community's ideas.
Okay, let's clear that up a little bit.
Okay.
How
How do the actions of the black communities now differ from those that Frederick Douglass took back then?
Okay, so how do the actions of black communities today differ from those that Douglas took
In 1852. Well, in 1800s.
took in the 1800s?
Yeah.
And their effects, right? Okay, so I think we have enough to get started. So let's start with our first level 2 question. How do you think the audience felt during and after the speech? Marcus.
Okay, wait, there was no before? Or, before and after? I thought she said during.
It says felt during and after. Are we correct about that? During and after the speech?
Yeah, before and after.
Before, during, and after. Okay, so it's before, during, and after.
Okay. Well, before the audience, I would say they felt kind of skeptical about Frederick Douglass, as in the sense of like maybe he's just up there for entertainment. It's not there for like the specific speech that he actually said. And during the speech, there's probably some people that still had like that were different, like that felt different about him. Still, like I always want to refer to something actually. Like whenever he got angry when someone was speaking in the audience, when I guess he heard someone, or he probably didn't even hear anyone, he was just making it feel like he was like tagging in all the points and everything. And I feel like after the whole speech, that he felt like the crowd felt well, I don't know, they probably were like shocked, well not shocked, but like astonished.
Okay, so after they felt astonished.
Yeah, like he actually like said all those because he like covered like a lot of points.
Okay, Kylie and then Lexi.
Like before the speech, they were like, oh, how is a black guy coming to speak at our 4th of July? And then during, they're just like, their speech was like, they're like, and then afterwards, they're like, oh crap, he like, just like spat in our faces, basically, like, they're like realizing, basically that he's basically telling them that they're bad people, like.
Okay, so elaborate on that before a little bit.
Like before the like, okay, it's a black guy coming to speak, and he has nothing on us because they're thinking they're smarter and more intelligent than he is. I mean, some of them have had schooling and everything, but still he's wiser than most of the people in the crowd.
Okay. Lexi.
To elaborate on what you said about schooling and everything, the fact that he was a former slave and he escaped and became a free man. Usually slaves back then didn't have any type of form of education or anything. They didn't really go to school. And the fact that, like, so beforehand they were thinking, oh, he probably really doesn't know what he's talking about. He probably doesn't really know how to deliver a speech. And then the form, like, he blew them away at the end. They were just left there with their minds full of all this like knowledge now, and he impressed them with like his rhetoric and all of his like elaborations on things, and it was surprising that he could have done that without any type of form of real schooling and real education.
Okay. Anyone else? Jeremiah?
I feel like for the speech, everyone looks like not really useless, but like not very well educated and stuff, and like everyone else said. But what I want to add is that during the speech, I feel like he probably took a lot of people off. Because there's the one guy who commented, "This won't change anything," and then he goes and he rebuttals him during the speech. And then I feel like also after the speech was over, and how during Mark Twain's speech or piece that we read, it talks about how some people want to stand up but they don't want to because they might get pushed themselves. So I feel like a lot of people were encouraged by that speech afterwards.
Okay, those are very, very good points. So he mentioned that probably a lot of people were very ticked off. Are there any specific ticked off moments that you guys noticed, that moments that would probably cause them to become ticked off from your text? Yes, the audience. While
Right at the very end, right at the very end, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without rival. We don't take too kindly to them yelling in our country.
yeah, so I mean, what exactly does that mean, Matt?
He's saying that, when it comes to being, a barbaric nation, when it comes to being hypocritical, America is the best.
Okay, Jalen?
I think when he said, oppression makes a wise man mad, and he explains that, he was like, your fathers were wise men and they did not go mad. Well, the whole paragraph. 11, the whole paragraph 11.
Okay, the whole of paragraph 11. Okay, Melanie?
Mostly paragraph 43, but the first sentence, what to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim.
Tyjon?
You asked him what made the audience mad that he said?
Yeah, because we're talking about what their reactions were before, during, and after the speech, and I think just about everyone agreed that before the speech they probably felt like Douglas was not qualified to speak, and during the speech they were surprised and probably a little bit ticked off by some of the things he said. So we're trying to highlight a few of those moments.
Well, I know they're probably mad when he said that America never looked blacker on this 4th of July, because they probably felt like they had worked for all of that when really it was the blacks who was doing all the work for the independence.
Okay, that's a very interesting kind of take on the black comment. I didn't really see that earlier. That's very interesting. Jalen?
In paragraph 3, when he gives the 4, he was comparing them to the people who founded the U.S., and he said there was 2 different types of oppression. They were men, and he said, you men will cherish the memory of such men. They were in great day in the generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast and with these degenerate times.
Wow. So those are strong words, right? Anybody else want to share anything about the audience's attitude before, how they felt before, during, and after the speech?
Well, technically, I mean, we know how they felt for a fact when it comes to. But I found when he goes into the point we've already brought up, when he goes into the calling out the audience and what one of the audience members said, we know that they felt upset then because he says in just the circumstances you and your abolitionists failed to make. Wait, where is it? What does it say? It is just in the circumstances that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on public mind. So if that's what they said, well then we can infer that they felt that what he was saying, despite the fact that he, composed this elaborate speech and was making valid points, that they felt that he wasn't making an impression on anybody. And that they were, the words he said were that.
Go ahead, Jim.
He said, in paragraph 35, America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false with the future. That was a good one. And he said, and bleeding slave on this occasion I will in the name of humanity, which is outrage and everything. That probably got upset. Yeah, it's false.
Okay, Brian.
Paragraph 4, where he's stating we're celebrating 4th of July and it's the birth of our nation and independence and all that. However, freedom is kind of contradicting because they're celebrating freedom. However, a lot of people don't really have freedom because he keeps repeating you and you're talking to fellow white people, you can say, and he's saying, well, in my perspective, we're still slaves because we're free from British Army and all that, but in our own country, then we're just enslaved.
I don't think that would make take the audience off because they already know. Because when he came, as they weren't using him they were basically using him for entertainment. They already knew that this day really wasn't for blacks. So I don't think they would take offense to him because they were expecting him to know that. You know what I mean? I don't think they would be mad when he said your national independence because that's probably how they feel.
Okay, Matt, go ahead.
I think to elaborate on Brian and kind of rebuke you, maybe they didn't feel that way when he was comparing them to the Founding Fathers, but when he tied it all back in together and compared the slaves' perspectives to the perspectives of the Founding Fathers, I think that's when they may have gotten upset with that, what he was saying.
Yeah, but this is in paragraph 4. He's talking about paragraph 4. He didn't go into anything.
I understand that, but I didn't.
But I understand.
But no,
he didn't.
He's basically setting up what he's going to say later on in the paragraph.
Yeah, but I'm saying when he said that, they didn't get mad. Maybe later on, we're talking about when he said that.
Okay, so the main idea of comparing how their feeling of it is probably to try to assess how much effect it might have had, right? How much effect his speech might have had on them making changes. This is really what we're trying to get from that, right? Yeah?
Yes.
So let's assess that. Let's try to talk about that. Do you believe it was effective in encouraging them towards change or no?
No.
Tyjon.
I feel like anytime somebody gets mad, it affects change because just like with the Ferguson thing today, people are upset, so they're trying to make change. And whenever you're mad, I'm trying to figure out how to. When you're mad about something, you think of ways to fix it or think all the components of.
Okay. Marcus.
I kind of get what Tyjon's saying, or what he's trying to say at least. Whenever, it's any old specific emotion, but especially when you're angry or mad or something like that, you overthink things. So maybe what he said in the speech, some things that he said, it's just completely blatantly out of anger and not because we discussed before, he didn't really write this down or anything. He wrote some points, but this is based off of what he was thinking probably throughout his life, what he's seen from personal experiences.
Okay. Did you have your hand up, Jaquan? Go
I
ahead.
said no when they change because they still probably the same stuff will happen. They encourage you for bad. They won't encourage change. They will still encourage to have slaves.
Why would you say that?
Because they probably still feel it's right. That's what the world has been brought to where they believe that having slaves is right. So So what he's saying can go out the other ear. It really wouldn't matter.
Okay. Sam?
To add on what he said about that they given, I think he said the need to have them or the right to have them. I would feel like that they think it's okay because of their economy. Like they're not going to be the ones going out there, like picking the cotton and stuff like back in the days. They don't want to be the ones doing it, so they might feel like it's okay to have them because it helps them. Like kind of in the long run, it helps America's economy and stuff like that.
Okay. Brian?
I'm gonna have to agree with him because actions don't always make like a change, because you see all these people protesting against the Ferguson and all that. Like his example, he said like how people would try to fight against it, but there's a reason why the judicial court came up with that final decision, because at the end of the day it was a guy. Doesn't matter his race, black or white. It was a guy that robbed a store and then tried to attack an officer. So I feel like yes, he's correct, but not like.
Okay. Go ahead, Marcus.
Okay, I just had a question. So he's speaking in the North, right? Not in like the South. So
Yes.
meaning as in slavery isn't like really in the North. So like we should be talking about like taking cotton and everything.
Okay, but let's take a look at paragraph 11, and we'll go back to what Sam said, and let's look at paragraph 11 where he has that interesting play on the word change, where he says, "Listen, we are trying to encourage change, but the only change that you guys care about so much is the change in silver and gold, right?" So he's saying the fact that you're benefiting from it, whether or not you're actually endorsing it outright, the fact that you're benefiting from the labor of slaves and so on, you're equally responsible, right? It's like standing back and watching it go on. Matt?
And to go back to what Jaquel said earlier, he said that he didn't think that it inspired change, and we don't necessarily have to infer, given that we're in present day and we know the events that fell after it. I mean, you have James Baldwin writing in the 70s still about the same type of deal that's going on in 1852, which means that sure, he tried to inspire change, and sure, more people took a change, but the change that actually occurred didn't happen until later.
Okay. Good point. Anyone else want to share something about that question? Okay. So let's go to the next question. It says, compare how the audience's opinion of Douglas changed before and after his speech. So we talked about how they felt during the speech, but how did they feel about him before the speech? How did they feel afterwards about Douglas specifically? Jalen.
I think before the speech, they didn't take him seriously. They just seen him as another black person, even though he was not a freed slave, they probably still thought he was a slave. And then after, they probably thought he was a lot wiser, and they probably took him more serious than they did before.
Okay, Tyjon.
I think they probably wanted him dead.
Okay, why would you say that?
I think they probably, because of how powerful his words were, and like they never seen a black man talk like that, and the type of change that he could influence. I think it scared them.
I think you might have a point, but can you specifically share some of those words? What are those fighting words that you saw?
Within the passage?
Yeah.
Well, it was a long passage, so. Yeah, she said fighting words.
I'll give you a minute, and you can come. We'll come back to you. You could go ahead and find those. Anybody else want to share?
Would it be?
No, I've got a really good one though.
Would it be when he says a person makes a wise man mad?
Okay, that could be one of them. Anyone else? Matthew.
The question being, how did they feel before and after? Well, if you look at it, because the president, who was Millard Fillmore at the time, was also there, and Millard Fillmore was anti-slavery. He was also the one that proposed the Missouri Compromise. so that the slave states that already had slaves could keep their slaves. But I think that he knew what Douglas was going to say, or at least along the lines of where he was going with it, or else he wouldn't have asked him to speak. And like I said, he was anti-slavery, so it would make sense that he went with what Frederick Douglass believed to be right.
Okay, Javon or Kendall, anybody? No?
That just kind of covered what I was gonna say.
You gonna talk about Millard Fillmore?
No, we
Yeah,
talking
I
about
know.
I was gonna talk about how when he stepped on the podium, how they were gonna we're basically gonna know everything he was saying, but just not as deep as he put it. That's what's going to
So,
Because Matthew is saying then that they might have expected some of that type of rhetoric from Frederick Douglass, considering that he was an abolitionist at the time. Right, and well, Douglass himself, and also because the president there was off the same kind of political ideas as Douglass, they might have expected that Douglass would have talked about this kind of thing. Is that what you think?
yes, but like I kind of surprised him when he started going a lot deeper into it. I can't tell you what that is in the passage, but like he goes so deep that it really surprises him at the end. Like I can't say it gives him a change of heart because I wasn't there at the time, but I honestly think it changed what a couple people's perspectives about black people and Frederick Douglass at the end of that.
Okay, Tajon.
I found some words.
Okay.
Where it says, like when you asked me like what words did he use, that was like shaming America, basically. He said, America, search out every abuse, and when you found the last, lay your facts side by side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me, for that revolting barbarically and shamelessly hypocrisy, America reigns without God.
Okay. Does anybody else agree with that?
yeah.
That was one of those OMG moments, right? Really? Did he really say that?
Oh my.
Oh my goodness, right? Did he really just say that? America is up there with the worst of nations that we could possibly think about, right? The atrocities number just as greatly as anyone else. Anybody else? The question was comparing their opinion of Douglass now, when he started and when he ended. Jeremiah.
I feel like after the speech was over, some of the audience might have looked up to him because this man had the courage. He had the courage after being a free slave to come back and still fight. And when he was free to go. He didn't have to care about everyone else. And then also he spoke out. No one else spoke out.
He's that one in 99,000 that Mark Twain talked about, right?
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't afraid. Plus, never mind. Let's think about like some of the verbiage that he uses. Like we said, it was surprising, right? It was surprising. Nobody would have. Think about the word euphonious. Who knows that word, or who would have expected that from somebody who had no formal schooling, right?
I think he was a lot more educated than even the people in the audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So whether it was grudging or not, probably at the end, their attitude or their opinions must have been somewhat improved, right?
Well, another thing is that even though a majority, and by majority I mean majority, of people back then were, for slavery, we also have to remember that this was at the White House in Virginia, which means that Virginia was a split state to begin with. And so you have people who are fighting for abolition movements as well as people who are fighting against it, which means that in the audience, you can't say that the audience consisted of only people who hated blacks. There were also, people who had abolitionist ideals.
Okay.
So maybe they, felt the sentiments that he was expressing.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add? Okay, so how does Douglass feel about America? I think we sort of covered some of that. Go ahead.
I feel like he's ashamed of them, and he feels like they're repeating, like it's like a repetition of what happened before, and that
A repetition of what happened when?
Right here, shoot.
Well, wait, I have something about the last question.
Pardon?
I can't.
Can't find it. Okay.
I'll find it.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Oh, well, I only have one thing to say about when the West Virginia thing was split and everything. That didn't happen until
That's
like.
not what I said. I
You
said,
still weren't Virginia
Just a
split
moment,
anyways.
Matt. Let him
You
get it
still
out.
wasn't Virginia split anyways.
but in their ideals, I didn't say literally split.
They weren't split. Their ideals weren't even split until 1857.
The Missouri Compromise stated that all the land that we were getting, we couldn't, certain land had to be split so that certain land could have slavery and others could not, which means that there was still a North versus South, which means that Virginia, which was still the root of all the problems, or not the root of all the problems, but still the root of where these problems were being dealt with, they still had ideals of abolition and still had ideals of slavery.
Well, yes, I know that.
I
But,
didn't say West Virginia, there was a split, and I said Virginia.
yeah, I know. You said Virginia was split anyways.
Yes.
Yeah,
And their
I'm
ideals.
just telling you. I know you.
Okay.
You didn't just state that like. I was saying that. I was just saying Virginia
Hey.
wasn't split until 1861, but their ideals were like not even like brought up really until around 1857.
Their ideals were
Okay.
I'm just saying that's
Just a moment, guys. Let's make sure that we're not getting off too far track. Okay, so we're actually trying to figure out how Douglas felt about America, right? That's our question here.
Right.
Go ahead, Kylie.
I don't know if this is what like Jalen was getting at or not, but like, cause they were, he says you were under the British crown. Like, you guys were basically slaves to them, and you come and treat another race the same exact way. So he's basically like, why don't you guys see that you're treating us how you want to be treated, how your fathers were treated, how they fought for their freedom, and you're taking away ours. So
That's wrong.
Cutting you off. I'm cutting you off. Anybody else? Sam.
I agree with Kylie. Like she said, you were treated this way, now you're treating us. But I'm saying that, kind of like how Britain was treating America, and then now the Americans are treating slaves, but it's like 10 times worse because Britain wasn't like whipping them down on their knees and they're treating them like this, taking their families, like completely splitting them apart and stuff. But I do agree with what she said. I'm just saying like it was far more worse. They're doing what was happening to them, but they're doing it worse to others.
Okay, so since we're actually talking about how Douglas felt, we need to be looking and pinpointing specific instances in the text where we saw his feeling come through. So, if there are times like that, Lexi.
In paragraph, I think it's 43, I don't know if I numbered it properly, but he said, what to the American slave is your 4th of July, and he goes on to use like these big words talking about like boasted liberty, unholy license, national greatness and swelling vanity. He says that your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, and he talks about hollow mockery and like fraud, deception, hypocrisy. He's like talking about all of their like celebrations, and he's demoralizing them and showing what it really means to them in like a negative way. And like to them it could be something obviously we celebrate still today, but to another race in which they don't have the same feelings as the way that the white Americans are feeling, he's showing them that in front of people who are enslaved and don't have any rights, they're just mocking them right in their face. Like, they're just shoving it in their face and they don't even realize it.
Okay.
So,
Jalen.
Go elaborate what Lexi said. This is paragraph 44. The last sentence really sums up how he feels when he said, "There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than all the people of the United States at this very hour." I think that's a good summary of how he feels.
Yeah, that's a good one to talk about how he felt, Matt.
I can't tell you the paragraph. It's on the last page, though. It's in the middle, and he says, "What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations with to their fellow men, and beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash?" I mean, he goes on and on to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs. And at the end of it, he says, "No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply." So he's saying that all of these very obvious things that they are clearly seeing, that they clearly know is wrong, why should he have to argue it when they themselves can argue it?
Anyone else want to add something to that?
I personally thought what was really strong to me was the very last sentence, "My soul sickens at the sight." Like that, I feel like that ties it all together because he's explaining everything, like how he feels about everything, and then he's just like, he ends it with "My soul sickens at this sight." Like when you talk about like your soul and stuff, it obviously means something to you. This must mean like everything to him if he says that, I was just like, dang, because it was just so strong to me.
Yes. All right. Guys, make sure that you remember that everyone needs to speak at least 3 times to get speaking points for today.
Right.
So there are several people who haven't spoken yet. I don't know if there's not anything that sparked your interest, but I do hope you think to speak. So we have another level 2 question, if you guys are done with that one. Does he apply a negative or a positive tone? Douglas, does he apply a negative or a positive tone when he's using those exclamation points? When we see those exclamation points in the written speech, what can we infer about his tone? Brian.
He's angry. Paragraph 40. I think. Like when he's stating like how he says, "Must I argue that system that's marked with blood and all that?" He says no, like he's technically shouting at the crowd like, "No, this is not right." So it can be taken either way, honestly. Like it can be negative towards them, like as in you need to change this, or positive as in, hey, I don't feel good about this.
Yeah, feel strongly about it.
Yeah.
Jeremiah.
I'm not really sure because I'm not sure if I did my numbers right when I numbered all the paragraphs. He says, "At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed," and then he says, "Oh!" exclamation point, and that makes me feel like I'm about to get yelled at or something.
Okay.
Or I'm about to, like, everything I've said can be countered, or like they have this list of grievances that I've done wrong, or that I don't feel like I'm gonna get nice things said to me after that, so I feel very negative.
Jaquel.
His tone was negative, but what he was trying to address wasn't necessarily negative. I think he had to approach it with a negative tone for them to realize that he was serious.
Okay.
And to know that he really wants change.
Okay. Somebody who hasn't spoken yet?
Do I have my points?
Yes.
Do I need to call you guys?
Yes.
Akira. Go ahead, say something. Got your dot.
Well, I don't think it was like we had a negative conversation about it. I just feel like it was really strong. Like he felt really strongly about it, so I guess it might have come out as negative to him. I don't think it was. I think he was really strong about it.
Okay, so why don't you think negative? What is it about it that's not negative to you?
I just don't feel like his message was negative.
Okay, so the message.
Yeah, the message was negative. It might have come off to them that way. Anyway, the fact that he's writing his book to them so rudely, I guess you could say, that it could have come off negative.
Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead, Javon. Yay.
I think his tone was negative, but I think his purpose of the tone wasn't, because he's really just trying to get him to realize that what they're doing is wrong, like what Jaquan said. He said, you said that his tone was negative, right? But his purpose wasn't negative. He just wanted them to realize that what they're doing.
Okay. Go ahead, Stephen.
I think it's pretty much negative because basically every time he uses exclamation, it's like ridicule.
Okay.
Like in paragraph 11, he says, they all hate change instead of silver, gold, and copper. And then I think in paragraph 36, he says, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never was blacker than me together. This was together.
Okay. That's a good point. Kylie?
Yeah, I didn't hear that as well. Well, his tone, yeah, like you guys were saying, because also the paragraph that he was talking about 42, I have it as, where he's saying y'all need not that, like, he said y'all need an earthquake to realize what's going on. Like, y'all need to be like slapped in the face to notice what y'all are doing.
Vernity?
I think his tone is negative because he said I will use the severest language I can convey.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. He himself acknowledges that his language is severe, right? Go ahead, Cheyenne.
I would say that it's pretty much neutral because he's just like she said, if he's just trying to get his point across. Right here, I don't know what paragraph it is. I like 41. It says, "Alas, that it should be so, yet so it is." And he's talking about Washington and the monument. But in paragraph 4, he states how exactly proportionate their movements were.
Okay, you mentioned Washington. What was his specific reason for mentioning Washington at that point?
He stated, we have Washington to our father. He's basically saying that, because the sentence that he was using it as stated, Washington couldn't die until he had broken the chains of the slaves.
Okay, so yeah. So he's mentioning that Washington himself broke the chains of his own slaves, right?
Yeah.
So what was the significance of him talking about that at that time?
Well, he said that the monument built by him was paid by the price of the human blood, so the slaves that he freed, despite the fact that they were freed, were never really free because them and their brethren had to build a monument